Hi, everybody. Welcome to Evoke Therapy Program's broadcast. Today is Tuesday, March 26, 2024. I am Dr. Brad Reedy, and tonight's format, for those of you that might be new to listening or watching, is an open forum. So, anytime you want to send in questions, make requests, you can have copies of slides. If that benefits you, you can email us at webinar@evoketherapy.com. Any questions that come in throughout the week, go to the top of the queue of these broadcasts, and the rest of the questions come from our live participating audience. So I'll get to those questions in just a second. Each broadcast, I like to focus on one idea, one aspect, one offering that we have. And tonight, I want to focus on our coaching services for parents, couples, families, or individuals. During the pandemic, of course, a lot more people became comfortable with doing work virtually, telehealth work virtually, coaching virtually. So we started that during the pandemic. And basically, what we've amassed is this large group of therapists who have been trained and continue to be trained in attachment theory, the kind of work that I talk about, the kind of base that I operate from when I do these broadcasts. And so, if you're interested in somebody helping you, clarifying boundaries, parenting, family dynamic issues, if you have a child coming home from treatment and you want to, even before they come home, create some wraparound support for you and for them. Reintegration from treatment settings, couples and intimacy issues, codependency, of course, is a huge theme. Even psychedelic therapy integration. We don't provide the psychedelic experience, but if you've had that experience, several of our therapists are trained in this model. You can contact us at coaching@evoketherapy.com, and we can find a way to match you up with somebody that fits your needs. So many of these folks have experience in the therapeutic industry, in the therapeutic field. So they've worked in residential treatment and other types of settings. So they can really be a good match for you. So check it out. So with that commercial, if you will, let's get into the pre-submitted questions for this evening. We have a few, and for those of you that are attending live, you can submit your questions at any time. And I'll start off with the first question. Somebody writes, my daughter is home after 3 months at Evoke and 12 months at a therapeutic boarding school. She has been home for about 8 months and is getting more and more stabilized. And so are we. I can handle a large amount of what could be considered mean or angry words from her and have been. I focus on letting her know how happy I am to sit on the couch with her, dance with her, and have her home and working on a very finely calibrated, structured home for her. Do you think I am doing a disservice to her by not calling her out in a way when she is mean or rude? She has also has lots of times where her language isn't great. She is autistic, depressed, anxious, ADHD, all of which are stabilized. Great question. Challenging question. And this really does go at the heart of the kind of work that we do here. And I'll start off with this. When I talk about what children need, when any of us talk about what children need, an attuned parent, a parent who can be an adequate container, who can be large enough to take in anger, frustration, disappointment, sadness, and pain from the child, metabolize it, and then reflect back a sense to the child that the child is okay. That doesn't imply, and I know my brain hears those kinds of ideas this way, and I know it happens for a lot of people that watch and listen and read what I've written. That doesn't imply that you have to take it, that it's right to take it, that you should take it, whatever is handed off to you. What it means is that's what we aspire to be for the people that we love, especially our children. We aspire to enlarge, right? We aspire to grow, to transform, to be capable. And so you don't have to take it if you can't. I've written before that when we show up to conversations or relationships or situations because we should, because it's the right thing to do, we'll end up hurting ourselves or the other person. So there's no should in this. There's no what you have to do or what the right thing to do is. That's not really what this work is about. What the work is about is understanding what you can and can't do. And if you reach your limit at any given moment, you're allowed to draw a line, to draw a boundary with the other person. And people always ask me the question, I asked the questions a long time ago of my therapist, the question of, do I just become a doormat? Is that what this is about to my wife and to my children? Or, do I become something else which runs the risk of being too rigid, too little capacity for them? And my therapist has said to me for many years, that's the right question that you get to decide. The question really is, who are you in a given moment? What do you need in a given moment? So what I would kind of change just a little bit in your question is it's not about calling her out because that's about her. It's about saying that's enough for me. I need a timeout. I need a break. I need to go meditate. I need to go on a walk. I need to go to work, right? I need to go to the gym to exercise. I need to eat some, whatever it is that you need to do, you're allowed to say that. I asked this question of my therapist, who I consider the greatest expert that I've ever had contact with in my life. I asked her this question a long time ago. Is the ideal that we become all capable for our children? And she said, that's not really the thing. Number one, it's impossible. And to aspire to it is to aspire to something impossible, which brings with it all kinds of pain and shame. But if you didn't have limits, then the child wouldn't understand that the world has limits. The child would assume that that there are no limits to their behavior, no edges, if you will, of the container. So the difference is the shift in this work is it's not saying you need to be kinder, you need to say it differently, you need to not use that language, because there are times, and I've said this many times, there are times when I can listen to just about anything from my wife or from my children. And there are other times when I can listen to little or nothing from them. The funny example that I give is sometimes I can hear them swearing at me and telling me how horrible of a father and a husband I am, and I can listen compassionately. And other times I want to strangle them for chewing their food too loud. So my capacity waxes and wanes. So the work is to focus on you and your capacity and what you can and can't do, not on the right thing to do. And that's a very strange transformation, a very strange kind of psychological bridge to cross. And the child will learn that when they bump up against your limits, they'll learn that they bumped up against your limits. Children can deal with a human parent who has limits. What they can't deal with very well is that it's about them. So when we go to our children and say, you're talking too much, my mother used to call me, I've shared this many times, the kind of buzzword that still rings in my head is she would say, when I was expressing big feelings, you're being melodramatic, is what she would say to me. So using that example, what she did was she took her sense of inadequacy, her sense of frustration, her limitedness, her humanness. She couldn't hold on to all of that. She couldn't own all of that. So she made me a problem. You are too much this or too much that. In my case, you are too melodramatic. So then I walked away carrying the weight of my mother's unrealized, undone work, if you will. I walked away thinking I was the problem, instead of walking away with the awareness that I have a human parent and I found their limit. Every parent has limits, and every child will find the edge of those limits. The problem becomes when the parent criticizes, calls the child out on it, so that they don't have to deal with their own limitations. They don't have to face it, because we don't want to be bad or imperfect parents. We don't want to carry around, this sounds strange, and I remember hearing this years ago and not really understanding what it means, but in the context of answering this question and the things I've already said, we don't want to carry around the badness in us. We want the badness to be out there or in them. And that is the principal or primary wound that we contribute to our children. So we learn to own it. I'm going to talk about this later in the week when I talk about communication tools and awareness. This idea that we own, as we grow in this, we own our limitations. We own our fallibility. We own the edges of our capacity. And then the child has to deal with the fact that they have a limited parent that at some points can offer very little. And at other points, of course, can offer very, very much more. So that's the idea, is you start to own your stuff and you draw the line. And she or they, depending on if it's another parent, they're going to get mad. They're going to push all of your buttons. They're going to try to say the thing to get you engaged more. And then you're likely going to lose your patience and end up abusing them, or swallow too much of your own pain and discomfort and abuse yourself. I talk about this in The Audacity to Be You, specifically in the chapter where I talk about marriage, and I give an example of my wife and I going through this process successfully in one simple Saturday afternoon discussion. And the reason I find this story that I told in that book so remarkable, it's a true story, as closely and as detailed as I can remember it, I put it in there, is that it was so simple. When you look at it, it seems simple and almost trite almost, but that took us 20 years of psychotherapy to arrive at. So I wanted to offer that lesson to all of you. So you get to draw the line, you get to draw the boundary, you get to say what you're comfortable and not comfortable with. It's the same idea in The Audacity to Be You of you don't get to be right anymore, but you do get to be a self, which is so much better. It's the same energy behind the saying in Al-Anon that no is a complete sentence. And the big shift when we get in recovery for our own attachment and developmental wounding, right? In other words, the way that we grew up, when we get in recovery for that, we make it a goal to be a person, not to be good. Trying to be good will end up most likely hurting the people that we love tremendously, more than we can possibly imagine. But if we can own our humanness, then our family and the people that care with us, they'll just have to deal with the fact that they have a human parent or a human spouse. Thank you for your question. Very difficult, very nuanced, very hard to explain. Next question. Somebody writes, I'm finding myself falling in the guilt and shame spiral, wondering if my decision to send my daughter to wilderness therapy will make our relationship worse. Along with these feelings come when I am doing the things that are enjoyable and wishing she could be there, hoping this is making sense. Absolutely. You know, I've talked about this with people that have had their children in wilderness therapy or other treatment interventions or any really limit or consequence that a parent gives. You don't know. There's the hardest part of this is that we have to deal with the uncertainty. When I talk about borderline defenses, if you're familiar with that idea of borderline personality disorder or borderline defenses, that is when any of us, not just somebody with a diagnosis, any of us get overwhelmed with stress and anxiety and fear and pain. We turn the world into polarizations, into white and black, either or, us and them, good and bad. That's how we de-stressed ourselves psychologically. So, unfortunately, the answer to your question is you have to do it. You by not sending her, you could hurt her. By not sending her, you could do the most damage. By sending her, she might be angry and push you away. You don't really have any guarantees of this. All you can do is seek to know yourself the best, seek to know the intentions of your heart the best, make the best decision you can, and then let go of the outcome. And it will be, this is really important for all parents. And if there are any children that are listening that have been in some kind of treatment process, the most important thing is if you need her to agree with your decision, to endorse your decision, to like your decision, to sign off that you are doing the good and the right thing, you're asking her to carry the responsibility that the parent has to carry. And that energy of wanting her to be over it or accepting of it or endorse it, that energy will more likely contribute to her holding on to rage and anger and resentment more than anything else. When you let go of it, she gets to feel it and move through it. When she's not allowed to feel it because it threatens your ego, which it does for all of us, right? When she's not allowed to feel it because it threatens your ego, your sense of goodness as a parent, as a mother or father, then the rage just builds, right? And it starts to leak out in other ways. It's like what my daughter said not too long ago, Emma, when she said the greatest gift that a parent could give a child is a willingness to be cast as the villain in the child's story. And that doesn't mean that we abdicate our sense of responsibility of the sacred role of parenting. It just means that we let them be angry. As I've done my work, and I'm by no means complete in this task, but as I've done my work and grown older and come to love my horrible, rotten self more than I used to, The cool thing about it for the people around me is you get to be mad at me. You get to not like me. You get to be hurt by something I've done. And I'm not going to run away when that happens. I'm going to stay engaged and listen and do my best to hear, to deeply listen to it from your perspective, to apologize. And the experience that you will have if you're my loved one, if you're somebody close to me, is that the result will be closeness. And the result will be that you get to own and work through your own feelings in the process too. So wonderful, common dilemma that we're all dealing with. I could speak on that question and answer virtually every time that we broadcast. Thanks for asking it. Somebody says, can you explain the phases earth, fire, water, and air? At Evoke, when we started, we came up with these ideas, borrowed them from some other similar types of programs. These three phases that take you through the growth process. Earth is about quietness. Earth is about grounded. Earth is about stabilization. Earth is like the base. And so in the first few days of our program, you come in, you write your story, you have a mentor, you have a lot of one-on-one time with the staff and with your individual mentor, and you're really just settling in. And that usually lasts anywhere from 2.5 to maybe a week if it's longer, sometimes longer. And then after you've settled, then you come into the group, and that's the fire phase. And you're welcomed into the group more formally. You get gifts, you get a fire making set, a Bodro fire. You get a whole bunch of stuff. But this is the time of change. This is where most people spend the bulk, the majority of their time with us is during the fire phase. It's about learning and growing. It's about letting go of old belief systems, letting go of old fears, old ideas, and learning. It's a transformative phase of the program. If in some cases you get to the water phase, this is about connection. This is about service. This is about this tends to be where somebody has internalized the process and now they're operating not from a consequence, an external consequence, but from that internal sense, that lived sense of the joy that comes when we taste water, when our thirst is quenched. And then air phase is a time for leadership. We do very creative things. We allow you to lead a day. We allow you to have a map and compass, all of the kinds of things that we allow during those phases. And you're typically seen by peers as somebody who's it's not quite the right idea, but kind of a junior staff, right? You're leading by example. You might even participate in interventions with some of the newer students at that phase in terms of offering ideas, feedback, suggestions to the staff. So we take you through that process symbolically. When we designed it, one of the things I'm proud of in our early design of our program was that we knew that most students, very rarely would students complete all 4 phases. Many of them, somewhere around 60, 70% would graduate from the program during their fire phase. The other 20, 30% would graduate on water phase, and then a very small percentage would graduate from air phase. And the question came to us is why is that? Like, how can we justify that idea? And the answer that we came up with is because we don't want anybody in any of our therapeutic processes, we don't want anybody to hear the message that you're done, that you arrive ever. We really think of the process as a beginning. We think of our intensive program as an acceleration of the therapy that you've been doing or a springboard into the therapy. See, psychotherapy, and I've written about this, this is really important for all of you, for parents who have children in therapy. This is really important for me to explain to you. Psychotherapy takes a long time to make dramatic endpoint. There are wonderful epiphanies and skills and tools that can give us glimpses all along the way for sure. But the fundamental kind of transformation and healing that we talk about takes a long time. And I think the biggest barrier to people doing the work is its pace, how long it takes. I've been working on myself therapeutically for 40 years. I was in therapy as a teen. I was in therapy as a preteen. I was in therapy as a teenager and then started again as a young adult and have been with my current therapist for 25 years. I mean, that's going to be the exception to the rule for sure. I'm going to be quite an outlier, but I still go, and not because I'm in crisis or unhappy. I go because it's a practice of mine. As a therapist, I find it absolutely necessary to have 1 hour a week dedicated to me, and sometimes I use that time for supervision with some of the things that I'm carrying with my therapy clients, with the people that I run intensives with. It's never too late to grow and to live, and one of the things that I love that Jamie, my therapist, has written in a couple of her books is that idea that so many people die before they die. I think my grandparents, to a large extent, died many years before they died, spiritually, psychologically. They had arrived at all the answers. I contrast that experience, that observation of them with my therapist who's well into her 80s now. And I cannot tell you the number of sessions that she shares with me that she just attended another class or found another author that she loves or learned something remarkable. And this woman has so much education, you cannot believe it, but she's always growing and learning. And that's how I think, in part, she stays so alive in this world. So that's our idea with this, with these processes, is to use metaphor, to use story, to use symbols, and always to point back to the idea that this is a lifelong process. Somebody writes, a few weeks ago, I submitted a question about how to help my grown daughter get on with her life. Your recommendation was to listen, hold space, and brace myself for the backlash. It worked. She left spewing at me, horrible, abusive language, and it hasn't stopped. My question today is, how much do I take and let go versus using some words or action to communicate that it's just too much for me? I'm doing my own work, and I am fully aware that her dysregulation is a manifestation or symptom of her borderline illness. The communication is all text. Has texting made situations like this even worse? I don't know if it's made it worse. It might make it easier to hide behind, and maybe that's what you mean by making it worse. But I think this is the very same question I answered at the outset of our broadcast tonight. Same answer. You get to decide. And if I was your therapist, I would not tell you when. I might say to you, if I heard one of your stories saying, I don't know that I could deal with that. But what I'm trying to model with you is not that you should set a boundary there. I'm trying to model for you that I also have limitations. I do not want people listening to me to hear me imply or suggest that I can do everything well all the time. I struggle with everything you all struggle with. I have most likely in some cases, in lots of cases, I have more conscious awareness of what I'm doing, but it doesn't necessarily prevent the mistakes or the pitfalls or the setbacks. And because of that, it allows me to have much more compassion for the people that I'm trying to teach or help or do therapy with. But the answer is the same as before. You get to decide. You get to decide. And if you don't decide, there will be a process in which your child carries more of the weight. And the response that you got from her, like you said, is not shocking. Anytime we make a change, this is really important. I talk about this sometimes in other contexts, and it's even more specifically applicable to these questions. As and when you get healthier, the people around you will not always, will very rarely support your growth, especially when it affects them, especially if it leads to you setting clearer, stronger boundaries with them. When I talk about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, and that process that we go away from our ordinary life and we go on this adventure seeking the thing that we think will bring us the prize that we're looking for, and the end of that journey is the dragon battle. The dragon battle is in your head, in my head. The dragon battle is the beliefs, the system. I was thinking about it the other day. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like this. If you can imagine a kind of medieval scene where a little child, I'm gonna have my children draw this to illustrate it. But if you can imagine a little child playing with their friends, doing their things, and being told that's not the way you should behave. Those are not the words that you should say. You shouldn't be playing with those toys. You should dress like this. These are the right things to say to people. These are the wrong things to say, right? A lot of that coming from the parent. And eventually, because this little girl in this medieval story is so constantly disobedient to these rules, she gets thrown into the dungeon. And what's placed as guard and the one door out of the dungeon is this mythological dragon. And the dragon represents the shoulds and the shoulds. It is the cultural accretions, the ideas that we think are right and wrong that keep us in that prison. So this girl lives in this dungeon, which of course is no place for a girl to live. And eventually she grows so agitated by being here, so angry, so upset. She grows and matures that she finally takes a stab, if you will, at getting past the dragon and getting out of the door and freeing herself so that she can go back out in the world and play as she is. And in Campbell, he talks about battling the dragon battle, but he also talks about the idea that you have to learn to love the dragon. And I ultimately just think of it in terms of you actually have to realize that the dragon isn't real, that it's made up. But that's not an insight driven, that can help, but that's not an insight driven process to free yourself from that prison. Like I said, the skills and the tools and the insights can assist, can help, but the fundamental capacity to get yourself out of the prison is to develop a stronger sense of self, the sense of self that you would have had you had a more secure attachment growing up. Had the primary goal in your childhood been to see you and to understand you, the dragon would have had no sway of you in the first place. So, going away from the mysticism and the mythic to the realistic, the answer is you get to decide. And the people around you aren't often going to celebrate and applaud when you get healthier. If everybody applauded us when we got healthier, we would all do it. It'd be a lot easier. And we wouldn't need therapists, frankly. I think of my work with clients as helping them build this base, this fundamental sense of themselves. And like I said, that takes long. I can't teach it into them. I have to respond to them in such a way that they re-experience themselves and they start to believe in themselves. And then they wave away the dragons as if the dragons don't even exist. And the dragons, in fact do disappear. So, thank you. Somebody writes, what happens when one spouse goes on a journey of self-discovery, but the other doesn't? What if they discover they're incompatible? How does the journey impact the relationship? This is a very, very difficult question. Let me talk about this. There are a few possibilities that generally happen in this situation. Number one, sometimes you develop more compassion. I love the idea that you go to therapy until you know who to apologize to in your life and what to apologize for. Go to therapy long enough until you know who and what to apologize to and for. So sometimes you develop more capacity. Sometimes you develop more love. Sometimes you develop a greater compassion for yourself. So you forgive yourself, which allows you to apologize. If you don't really forgive yourself, it is nearly impossible to offer an adequate and healthy apology. That's just a truth. Otherwise, the words of the apology serve to still take care of you, to be forgiven, for example. So you have to forgive yourself. Sometimes you set an example for them, especially because you are more compassionate and non-judgmental, especially because you're more accountable for your contribution to the negative dynamics in the relationship. Your partner doesn't feel compelled to do the work, doesn't feel guilty, doesn't feel like you're criticizing them into the work. They get to taste the fruits of it and they will follow. The invitation that comes to them will be in the kindness, the love, the generosity and the compassion that you display for yourself and for them. And of course, it can get to the point where they still don't want to do their work and aren't interested in this journey that all of you who are listening, I assume, are on. And if that is the case, you get to decide. It could lead to incompatibility. It could lead to separation or divorce or a breakup, for sure. That's a possibility. And you get to decide. I've talked about this before when this is a very common fear, and not just a common fear, but a common reality that people experience. See, the more work that you do, the more you realize that this is really about becoming who you are. And I don't know what that means for the relationship. I love this question somebody asked. I forget who asked it. Some famous, great person. I don't know who it was. But somebody asked them, how in the world did you stay married to the same woman for 50 years? It was a man that was asked the question. And he responded with, that's easy. She's not the same woman I married, and I'm not the same man. And I think for a lot of us, um, for almost all of us, that's as scary as can be. So just about anything can occur. But what doesn't occur is you making yourself miserable and or making them miserable as a result of your misery. What doesn't occur is you punish them and shame them for how little of the work that they've done. That if it does lead to a breakup, which by the way is not what I'm suggesting should happen, but could happen, then you do it with love. The work is the same either way. And the risks are great if somebody eventually doesn't step up to the plate and take the responsibility for their own life. And in a very real sense, it could be said that you're to blame for the divorce. If you had stayed the same, if you had stayed small, if you had stayed in the version of your old self, you might not be getting divorced. You might be running around the same circle, the same track over and over again. But because you grew out of it, you grew out of that cycle, that may or may not make the marriage workable for you. But you get to decide. All the possibilities exist for sure. Thank you for asking. All right. Somebody asks the question. We, parents of an Evoke alumnus, are thinking of going to the NatSap Advocacy Day, April 17th in Washington, D.C. Any thoughts about how to make it work best for Evoke and other wellness therapy programs? I've done it myself, by the way. I've gone a couple of times. It's, first of all, very, very fascinating. And the only advice I can give you is I hope you can enjoy your part in democracy. It's fascinating. I've met with senators and congressmen and women. It's been fascinating. They give you a short period of time. The only advice that I'll give you is figure out a way to tell your story in a succinct way. Figure out to tell your story. That's the goal. Tell your story. Talk about the difference that it made for you and your family, and tell it in as few words as possible. Find a way to tell your story, even though it's a story that could last hours. Try to find a way to tell it in 5 minutes, and then practice it a little bit. But it is when I've been there before, it is a fascinating experience. And you will find, regardless of your particular political interests, you will find that the conservative branch of our government will be more supportive of you. And the liberal branch of our government will be less supportive of you in general. The conservative branch of our government tends to empower parents, except for, of course, when it comes to some certain issues, tends to not want to get involved in family and parent decisions. And the liberal side tends to want to empower even young children with choice and autonomy, which doesn't quite fit with what I think about the role of a parent. So that was shocking to me. It was shocking to me that some of the politicians that I respected and voted for wouldn't see us, and some of the ones that I didn't vote for and had less respect for their particular political ideology were very, very supportive of us. But tell your story and learn to tell it as briefly as possible, and enjoy the experience in democracy. It is absolutely fascinating. And you can make a difference. You can make a difference. When I did it, we got them to rewrite some of the legislation that they were working on in ways that we found very, very supportive of families and children, and also allowed us to do the work that we do of saving families. So good luck. Are there any more questions, Livia? No more questions. Wow. Not a long one tonight. All right, folks, let me go over the upcoming announcements. And then if there's one question or two at the end, I'll address those. My 2 books, The Journey of the Heroic Parent and The Audacity to Be You, are available on Amazon and Audible. If you want to do a deep dive into your own work, our Finding You intensive is that opportunity. It gives you an experience of what it feels like for 5 days to feel really, really safe and the impact that has on your mental health. And like I always say, if we do a good job, and I think we do an exceptional job at our intensive programs. When we do a good job, the experiences that you just want more of it. You just want more of it. April 10th is the next offering. I believe there's a spot available. I know there's a spot available April 10th, April 10th through 14th, and May 1st through 5th. We also have an online option. The next online option, which is about half the time and a third of the price, is May 17th through 19th. You can always schedule a custom family, co-parenting, or couples intensive. In any case, if you have more questions, go to our website, use the QR code here on the screen, or go to and email us at intensives@evoketherapy.com. We have support groups for our alumni parents and our current parents. The next offering for our alumni and current parents is March 28th. That's 2 days from now at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Once a month, we have an alumni parent only meeting for our wilderness family. April 15th at 6 p.m. Mountain Time is that alumni only meeting. That's for people that are a little bit farther along in the process. And then for our intensives and coaching alumni and current clients, April 8th at 6 p.m. is your once a month offering. You can go to support groups at evoketherapy.com for more. Like I mentioned earlier, if you want a coach to work with you virtually on all the issues, self-awareness, guilt and shame related issues, the same questions that you bring to me each time, coaching at evoketherapy.com is your email. We invite all parents. I invited all professionals. I met with about 85 professionals this week. And I implored them, I begged them to just go to an Al-Anon meeting. And so few of them ever have been. And yet they're advising us what to do with our children. I just want them to know what it feels like to walk into a room and to feel that fear, that anxiety of that exposure, to confront our own dragons around the shame of mental health and mental wellness. So we ask all current parents, anybody listening to me, I would invite you to try out. And they do encourage you to try 6 of them because they can all be different. Any 6 of any of the following 12-step support groups: alanon.org, coda.org, familiesanonymous.org, adultchildren.org, refugerecovery.org is a wonderful alternative, Buddhist-inspired, less of an emphasis on a higher power. And of course, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org, has free classes and resources in your local community. All these broadcasts are available on the podcast app. You can just go to any of the podcast app that you have or Spotify and search in the search bar, Finding You, an Evoke Therapy podcast. Subscribe there, and then it will be in your feed, and you'll be notified when new episodes drop. You can also go to soundcloud.com on your computer and listen to us there, or you can go to Evoke's YouTube channel and watch the video rebroadcast of these, and you can see the slides and my face and the words coming out of my mouth. You can find Evoke Therapy programs and me, Dr. Brad Reedy, on X, Threads, and Instagram using the handles at Evoke Therapy and at Dr. Brad Reedy, respectively. And of course, Evoke Intensives also has an account on Instagram with inspiration, testimonies, invitations for various program offerings. You can go there on Instagram and find us at using the handle at Evoke Therapy Intensives. You can find us on Facebook by searching Evoke Therapy Programs or Evoke Therapy Intensives. And of course, we have a blog with wonderful content of our staff sharing about their own journey. So looks like no other questions have come in for this evening. So I will be back about 48 hours from now, March 28th, 6 p.m. Mountain Time. I'll be talking about communication theory. I'll be talking about communication theory and skills. I look forward to that because, again, I'm going to present to you the basic skills that most people teach, but I'm going to try to connect them to the underlying psychology of what I think these really offer to us. And I think you might be surprised at what you hear if you haven't heard me talk about this before. All right, folks, I'll talk to you then. As always, I hope this is a helpful point of contact for you. And for on behalf of the people that you love and the people that love you, thanks for showing up and being willing to do your work. Have a great evening, and I'll talk to you in a couple of days. Bye-bye.